questions and comments. If I may ask those of you who spoke at the last meeting to hold your fire until others have a chance to speak, and then we will turn. Yes, sir.
Good evening. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, second time I listened to it, and the second time you get more out of it than the first time.
I've heard it about 15, 18, 20 times, and I have to say that I've learned, there's a diminishing turn. I mean, up to the 12th time I was learning new stuff, and then that curve began to flatten.
Let's see. Okay, I was a little disappointed by your plan of the map room, although I definitely agree that the map resources should and must be preserved, no doubt, because I'm a map aficionado. One question, with all the space that appears in the levels between A and 1, have you or your architects considered that there's enough space to install, let's say, a restaurant, cafe, bookstore within those levels? Why or why not? And what are your eventual plans for map preservation?
Yeah, let me talk to those questions in the order in which you raised them. The map issue, again, it's not the map room, let me underscore that. We're talking about the map storage room. And we have Matt Knudsen here this evening. I see Kate in the back as well. The folks who are most committed and concerned and attentive to our maps have said this is not a good place to store maps. Too much light, the climate isn't correct. The plan is to move these maps into appropriate storage, most likely in the Milstein stacks where climate controls are in place, but this is still a project that we are undertaking. What I can say, absolutely, is that we are no longer going to store maps in that space. That's irresponsible. We will store them in a better space. What happens with that storage space is still under discussion, partly why we have such meetings and why we're speaking with trustees and other stakeholders. Is this the best place for that? To loop back to your question about other spaces, every possible space has been looked at in the building. Perhaps Iris wants to say something to that, but we've investigated every space, wherever it is, to make sure that we get maximum use for public function.
So I'm going to have Liz weigh in on this as well. So one of our issues when we started embarking on this master plan, and Liz talked about it, is that we were creating zones in the building where we wanted people to sort of congregate and go. And so one of the natural places where the public comes in, where tourists come in, is actually the first floor around Astor Hall. So that's why we wanted to have the library shop as well as the cafe, possible cafe, be on that first floor. Is there other possibilities for the cafe? Yeah, there are. I mean, there could be a possibility of looking on the ground floor, but the architects, in looking at the plan, felt that that would bring people in conflict who were either going to Bartos or going to now the new educational center. I don't know if Liz, you want to add any more if I sort of answered it correctly. Great.
Sir.
Yeah. No mention was made of the Dorot division.
Right.
What is that? What's going to?
We are not touching any of those reading rooms. The periodicals room, the map reading room, Doro, they will remain in their current state. These are precious assets. And what I have said to Liz on about a dozen different occasions is do no harm, and there are no plans to do anything to Doro.
And exhibitions will be in the same place?
I'm sorry, sir, exhibitions will be in the same place?
The middle of the first floor.
Yeah, what we will be opening is a new exhibition space. I've been speaking about it as a necklace of sorts. Wackenheim is the current exhibition small space. Gottesman will be the large space, and then we will open another exhibition space in what is currently the shop. This is the current plan at any rate, which would be called the Bartos exhibition space. So you'd have 3 exhibition spaces lined up. They could do one exhibition, 2 exhibitions, each an independent one, 3 groups. It gives our wonderful new exhibition director, Declan Kiley, an opportunity to be creative about the space that's in play. And it creates a kind of common area, again, I think that speaks to the grace and grandeur of Astor Hall.
Right now, how many exhibition spaces?
Right now, what's operating, on the first floor is Wackenheim. Gottesman has in the past been an exhibition space, but it's been largely dark for the last few years. We will be opening it, as you saw, as a brand space, and then we'll open a brand new space next to it. Space on 2, which currently is a kind of history of the library space, we're looking at ways to move that down to 1 as well. We're still, as Liz said, in the early stages of this, but the idea would be to retain 2 and 3 as spaces for researchers and scholars rather than encouraging the public. We can't, as I say, people, this is a public space, but would like to encourage those spaces being focused on research and reading. Yes, ma'am, please.
Thank you. Since you're brainstorming still about
Yes.
the stacks, I suppose we could draw a conclusion that you have no intention to use them for their original purpose. It would seem to me that your first thought would be to upgrade the temperature, humidity controls, and bring back the books. Right now, researchers can't use the books. They have to wait too long to get them. Apparently, you have other plans, and you're not going to bring back those books. Am I correct about that?
No, ma'am, you are not. I have no plans at this point. I don't think any of us do. The reason why we have commissioned a study at considerable expense is to take a look at what the options are in that space, to consider the cost, and we'll come back to you when we have some options to talk about.
But what
That's not the subject of tonight's
options,
meeting.
except for the original purpose?
Well, if I knew what the
possible
options
money?
were, I wouldn't need to commission a study. So we will find out where we are with that, please. Yes, ma'am.
2 quick questions. When the renovations are complete, what do you anticipate the average number of people to be using and working in the building on a typical day to be, A? And B, do you envision a more robust, a less indifferent security system at the front and the side entrances?
Yeah, let me answer both of those because they're both on my mind. It's difficult to project these numbers based on past practice because past practice will alter when you make change. It's a dynamic circumstance, as you understand. We had last year 3 million visitors to the building. As we open more exhibition space, we would expect more exhibition people more people to come to see exhibitions. We will expect more scholars because the second floor reading rooms, quiet reading space, offers, I would hope and plan on a more hospitable space for researchers. And in general, we expect the census in the building to expand. But I've learned that making projections on the future based on past when you alter the variables is a fool's game. So I'm not being deceptive, I don't know, other than to say we expect a more robust use. In terms of security, absolutely, this is a concern of mine, and particularly as we open another entrance, as we deal with a research and learning space. This is something that Iris and I talk about a lot and try to understand and cost out ways in which we can be more robust. As you know, the checking in front end, the front is a recent event. Again, I came and was very concerned about that. I don't find that an entirely satisfactory solution. On the other hand, I'm not interested in introducing a police state. But there are a variety of measures that we are considering. So yes, that's a very important point. And if we get a more robust census, then we need to redouble our efforts. Yes, sir in the back and then Charles. Yes, you, sir.
Me?
No, gentlemen. Yeah, just kidding. Yes, sir.
Hi. My 2 questions are, over the summer, I noticed that the library has brought food trucks on the 40th Street corner there. Will that be suspended? That's my first question. And the second question would be the attraction of a second 40th Street entrance. I just want to confirm that there is no plans to have school buses along a very congested street.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Aris answer the first part of the question. The second, even if we wish to do such a thing, we would not be able to do that. But Iris, please.
If we could get rid of the food trucks. So I think as people know, or if they don't know, I'll explain. Having been the transportation commissioner in the city of New York, it's amazing how much information you have. Food trucks are regulated by the Department of Health. They give out permits to people to operate food trucks. The preference is to give veterans the right, this was done decades ago, to give veterans the right to operate food trucks in the city of New York. Needless to say, we've all seen these food trucks. A lot of people operating them don't look like veterans. What is going on is that somebody who has this permit then leases it to somebody else who gets to operate the permit and have that food truck. The food trucks are a big issue, particularly in Bryant Park. As you can well imagine, the Bryant Park Corporation is very concerned about this because it does clog up the street. Witness my arm. I actually fell on 40th Street and dislocated my shoulder. It wasn't because of a food truck, it was because of a cracked sidewalk, but that's a separate story. Anyway, so we will not be encouraging more food trucks, but this is really a city issue that really needs to be dealt with. And I know that the Bryant Park Corporation is focused on it. The second thing, as for the buses, so the answer is no, we will not be encouraging buses to come on 40th Street. The intention will be and as you saw in the rendering, I mean, our hope is that we get middle school and high school kids who come here. And currently now, when they go on class trips, they do not use buses. And if we get a grade school group, we will discourage them. And if they want to come, we will discourage them from taking a bus. There's a lot of mass transit in this neighborhood. We will encourage those schools to bring those children in that way.
Charles.
I wanted to ask a little bit about infrastructure and whether these additions are needed. So I look around the building and I see 3 front doors, only one of which is used. And then I hear about congestion and the need for another entrance. And so I wonder if it wouldn't be a simpler way to at least try to address the problem, to find a way to open the 2 doors that are perpetually closed. Let me just, it's a more global question. I have the same question about stairs. Now, of all the buildings in New York, the building that you think of as having a surplus of stairs, and magnificent ones at that, is this building. Not only are the middle stairs, the grand stairs and the scissor stairs on the north end, but there's a stair here, and I believe that goes all the way up and down. There's a stair right there that goes all the way up and down, except for the lower level because of the porte-cochere entrance. So there are other smaller stairs that go other places. There's an elevator here, there are 2 elevators there, there's an elevator in the stacks. I find, first of all, it's impossible to figure out where you're putting the stairs because there are no plans. It's impossible to know what's happening to, say, room 200 and 200A because you have no plans. So I don't have time to go through each thing and say, well, where's this, where's this, where's that? So I'm trying to look at this more globally. Why is this stair over here, why is this new stair necessary when there will be 1, 2, 3 stairs going more or less all the way up and down? And I heard you answer the last time that it was because it didn't go all the way down to the basement level. And I hope that the people arriving in this building have sufficient education to be able to figure out when they get to a floor that there's some way to get to the other stairs that exist to take them to other places. What is the need for it? And what is the need for the second elevator? Is this to get people access to the library's strong suit, food for thought, or is it to take care of food? Is it a catering elevator? Are these catering stairs? And one last infrastructure question. If you have to put in new infrastructure to heat and cool a restaurant, why couldn't you put in new infrastructure to heat and cool a map storage room where it is now? Why can't you adjust the building as it is to keep the maps in proximity to the use of the maps?
address that as globally as you asked it, without, floor plans right here. What we're trying to do is think about each user group who comes here and not drive them all through Astor Hall. So that when groups do come, or when people come for events that could be hundreds of people in Bartos Forum and in Room 84, and on that side where there are a lot of NYPL sponsored events and other events, we don't think it's appropriate to have everybody saying, from a wayfinding point of view, everybody just comes through Astor Hall and then disperses themselves and tries to find their way. We feel like it makes more logic in a building, just like many other major institutions here in historic buildings have a series of entries and not one single entrance. This is a very, very big building. Once you get in the building, actually, to just take a specific, for the Center for Research and Learning, which will have an entrance on 40th Street, in that south quadrant of the building, there is not a stair that goes from the ground floor all the way up, except for across the loading dock. So we would have to have students come into the Center for Research and Learning, go down through the loading dock, back up into the building, and then take the stairs up, the south stairs up. But to tell people to just go up one flight, walk around the corner, go up another flight, but don't stop on the second floor because that's behind another security area, because there are security needs here, then go up to the third floor. Actually, we've looked at it from a planning point of view, and we think it makes sense to provide a consistent, legible, easy to find core of elevators and stairs that just go through the building. And is being done sensitively in a space that has seen change over time and will not have an impact on the corridors, the main corridors. So we feel like it's appropriate both from a functional and from an architectural point of view. So that's just an example, and it's just to say, by way of thinking, we think that the building will make more sense to have these three sets of entries that clearly get people to their destinations. So the HVAC is about adding up. The HVAC, the plan is to add, there's a cooling tower that's on the roof up above on the Southport side of the building, and we're adding another cell to that, increasing the capacity of the piping to allow more air conditioning to come down to the lower floors into other spaces. There are multiple reasons why we need more air conditioning and ventilation and humidification systems. It is not just for one space or to open a restaurant. We're talking about opening about 30,000 net square feet of additional public space that's going to need conditioning. We're also talking about the replacement of air handling units. There are 59, 64, I can't remember, higher, he's saying, more than 64 different air handling units spread throughout the building. Many of those are reaching the end of their service life and also have to be assessed for what kind of space that they are conditioning. So the infrastructure investment that we're making is servicing the special collections, it's servicing these new amenity spaces, it's servicing the new exhibition spaces that have their own needs as well as the amenity spaces. So it's for all purposes, not just for one.
Sir, you, sir.
There have been several mentions of a proposed stack study, but no one has said what issues are going to be addressed in the study. Would you tell us what issues the study is going to address?
The mandate is to take a look at 175,000 square feet of space and to consider not only the cost of refitting, retrofitting space, but what are the options that are available to us when we currently have Milstein 1 and 2 online. All the books that left the stacks have returned. So what can we do with this remarkable space thinking about the future? What are the positions, what are the possibilities that we can look at, and what are the costs? And to do it in a way that doesn't enter into a preconditioned assumption about where we're going. Certainly I have an absolutely open mind, and I'm anxious to hear what our colleagues at BB&B and at Makanu put on the table. But again, I have nothing to say at this moment about any of that. What we're doing is asking people to talk about that space and then to have another conversation about what might be possible there. Someone else who didn't speak last time, Peggy.
I am very concerned. If I could have the microphone, not thank you so much. With the other people who have spoken, I'm very concerned about the fragmentary, episodic nature of the plan that is being presented at this stage. as Peter Baldwin said to the trustees before they voted to accept this plan, to have a plan that does not take account of the stacks and some idea of what's going to be done with the stacks before the other pieces of the puzzle are put into place seemed to him puzzling, irresponsible. I wasn't there, but it does seem to me both puzzling and irresponsible. We have talked about the use of the stacks for the purposes for which they were designed, that is, to put books into them so that they are available to us scholars who need to use them, so that those precious books do not have to be carried back and forth. I had a book today that is falling apart, Philippe Loire, Les Enluminures Romanes. It's falling apart, and it is tied together with string and shipped back and forth to Princeton. That is cost that is going to escalate. It's not going to get lesser, and that's what the stacks were built for. That's what they should be used for. I am concerned as well about the process of consultation and discussion. The trustees have got to be involved with us, with the staff members who are working with the public and with the other public that is being serviced by all these rooms and the exhibition space. This is a research library, and that is what this is library for. Let's have consultation that gets us together with the trustees, with the staff who work with us, with the trained librarians, and plan for the restoration of this library to the state in which it was when I first started working here, and I want it back.
Thank you for those comments. I would just respond in terms of another thing about the way it was. Before we were involved in a shared collection in Princeton, all of the volumes we had in our catalog were the volumes that we possessed. We now have 7 million volumes in our catalog from the Princeton and Columbia libraries that were not part of our collection. And as we move closer to a partnership with Harvard in this deal, the number will swell to 14 million. So that's just
We've lived with interlibrary loan for a long time. We need the books back here.
Who else hasn't spoken? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, also, different
speaking.
We'll have a chance.
Yes, I fully agree with the concern about the stacks. It's a research library, and the number one issue and the highest priority for all of us is that the research should go as smoothly as possible. Everything else is detail. This is the essence of this building, and it is the best document delivery system. As a retired librarian, and there are other librarians here, I think, who can attest that. It's a wonderful book delivery system, and it's not new. It has worked for over 100 years, so there is a history to this story. So the other point what I want to make is that both the building and the land on which it stands belongs to the city. You don't own it. New York Public Library just manages the building, and at the time when the agreement was made with the city, between the New York Public Library and the city, the agreement was the city provides the building and maintains the building, and the library develops a collection and maintains the collection, and thus the library functions in this building. And because of this beautiful system, the delivery system is completely closed, so everything is safe and protected, and everything is incredibly efficient, very fast, and very simple. What bothers me after all this, why are you outsourcing both the library collection, the research collection, and hundreds, really many hundreds of jobs to Princeton, New Jersey, from the city of New York, and not even in the state of New York. It is in Princeton, New Jersey, and for your 7 million volumes, let me say something else because of my library background, which I'm sure others know. Are you aware of Metro?
I'm sorry.
Yes,
I
there's
didn't
an
hear what you said.
organization in New York City called Metro.
Yes, I'm well aware of that.
It's the Metropolitan Library Council, and it consists of 275 libraries, everybody around here. And there is a cooperative organization among them. I was working for Hunter many years, and if any student wanted something from Columbia, they would just get a Metro card for a day free use of the facilities. So they could just go there. We are in a large metropolitan area. There are hundreds of wonderful libraries. Now, as for the recap collection, the off-site collection, Princeton only contributes less than a quarter of it. I want everybody to know that. 23.7 the last we were informed. And we contribute the largest percentage. So it doesn't seem like a fair system. It doesn't seem necessary because Columbia we can get to being in New York, and we can go to 275 libraries. Either on-site can go or request materials through interlibrary loan. So, and you have outsourced over 500, well, I looked at the numbers, and in 2000 there were over 1,200 library jobs in the research libraries. Do you know how many, or maybe you can tell us how many are today?
What I can tell you is that
Yes.
that number is deceptive, because we have now moved to a very digitally based library, as well as books. We are doing both digital and print, like every research library in the world. We need to sustain both of them. So when we hire people in the digital division to manage the digital collection, they don't appear as research librarians, but they function as such. My challenge is to be able to afford both book and both virtual and print. That's digital and print. That's a big lift, and most libraries are making choices that I'm not prepared to make, which is to say we want to provide both and to be able to do that requires the kind of collaborative partnerships that we've been able to enter into with other libraries. And that is part of the appeal of RECAP, part of our capacity to be able to scan and deliver from that collection, part of the capacity for people to order in advance and have books from those great research libraries available to them. Yes, next question.
Yeah, so the plan talks about repurposing spaces for middle school and high school and college groups, but you're removing the children's library. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what is the library's plan to kind of cater to a younger
Right.
set of people and bring them up through the library system? Because, you say that teaching kids how to use resources that aren't Google is one of your top priorities. So I'm just wondering, how is moving the children's library across the street serving that purpose?
Right. One of the concepts that is in place in the plan is, I'm not sure I'm wild about the term campus, but the idea is that the division that has existed between MML and 42nd Street, the main library, isn't in anybody's interest, in my view. At the same time, I'm concerned about traffic flow in the building. The thing that I heard over and over and over again before I joined the staff at the library was, and from some of the people in the room, was that it's very difficult to do research because it's too noisy. How do we manage to maintain traffic flow so that researchers are at peace in this way? The notion of moving the children's library across the street where there'd be a brand new children's facility built was not to exile them, but to speak to the traffic flow questions and to develop synergies between the two institutions, not only in terms of children moving back and forth, but also in terms of programming and a variety of other issues that we'd like to pursue. So it is not lost to me that we want to encourage that flow, but we're going to try to do it by imagining a broader campus rather than a single building.
If I can just also say about MML across the street, by moving the children's library across the street, it afforded us an opportunity to create now a 25,000 square foot children's library across the street. As well as the concept, and this is not to talk about MML, was to really, and if Francine were here, she would say it, to have a building that creates an atmosphere of lifelong learning. So a children's library, a business library, an education center, as well as our biggest circulating library in the system. So.
Yes, ma'am. Your turn.
I think it's
Where is the microphone? Well, I can project.
It's coming.
I've spoken many times about my feeling that the library is the laboratory of the humanities. And I've been saying this in public meetings since 2012, which reminds me also that this is not the beginning of our questions and answers. We have been doing this for 5 years. Apart from that, the library being the laboratory of the humanities, would a scientist, a chemist, let's say, be asked to wait 2 or 3 days for a reagent in a reaction in which he was in the middle of? We are using books the way chemists and scientists, I used to be a biologist, are using their experimental materials. And these books actually, the ideas in them set off chemical reactions in our minds as well. And we need the books when we need them, not just 2 or 3 days later. A lawyer in one of our trials several years ago didn't understand this and poo-pooed the idea that we didn't, what's 2 or 3 days? It's very interesting. When you're thinking, 2 or 3 days is a very long time in your process of thinking.
If I may
Yes.
respond, thank you for the question.
So the stacks is the point.
Right, I understood. The current collection in Milstein 1 and Milstein 2, those stacks in the vaults that attend them support 4.3 million volumes. We currently have 3.3 million in place with room to expand. The average delivery, and I'm sorry, in requests that we get, 91% of the requests are available in those spaces, 91%. The average delivery time, and we monitor this extremely closely, speak with Matt Knudsen and Denise Hibea about this all the time, is 29 minutes from the time that you request a book to delivery. This isn't an estimate, this is the data that we have on that delivery time. We are currently working on a request hold button that you can request books before you come to the library, and they will be there for you when you get there. Those books that are not available, that are in Princeton, we deliver in 1 day, not 2 or 3, unless it is a weekend. They are delivered with promptitude, and they can be ordered currently. They can be ordered in advance, so they are here when you arrive, which has been a major innovation that I've devoted lots of time and lots of energy to. To the larger point, I think about this, I mean, I have, my life, my perspective on the world altered with grandchildren, and my concern is that these books be available for my grandchildren's grandchildren. And if it means I have to wait a little bit of time for a book that is being stored in optimal condition. I take Peggy's point about books. The reason why books, in my view, are tattered and torn and tied up is because the conditions under which they were held were not optimal. So that's how I'm thinking about that issue. Michael, and then I think we have time for one more after you.
It seems to me that the new elevator and the new stairs are a significant undertaking, and I don't know how much it's going to cost dollar-wise or percentage-wise, but it seems like a huge fraction of what you're doing. And it also seems to me that what the building needs in terms of circulating assistance is interrelated with whether the stacks are used for books or whether they're used for something else, people. So isn't it interrelated? What are those costs? How much of this project, how much of this is going to cost? Also, I'm wondering, I noticed the film was shortened to take out the introduction that said that the Stephen A. Schwarzman building represents the democratic ideal. And that was always very awkward, so it's a good shortening. But I saw it in the clip of the gift shop, the present gift shop, the book Dark Money on sale, which is about how Stephen A. Schwarzman, and he's talked about in that book, participated in the hijacking of democracy. So I'm wondering if there are plans to take Stephen A. Schwartzman's name off the building. There were a lot of names put on the Sybil building, and by my reckoning, Stephen A. Schwartzman's name has been on this building by about as long as those names were on Sybil before you decided to start getting rid of Sybil and taking those names off. So is that a consideration?
I assume that's a speech, Michael, not a question, and I will treat it as such.
No, that's actually a question.
No, sir.
Okay, now wait. What about the cost of the stairs and and what percentage and dollar amount are we talking about?
I definitely do not have that question off the top of my head to answer. This is a $300 million project, and I can say that, and just from an architectural point of view, it is not a significant percentage.
Is it related to whether the stacks are used for people or books?
No. Last question from someone again who hasn't, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't answer Mr. Charles Warren's question about the map annex, so I will ask it again.
I was asking this lady, I will give you an opportunity to speak, but after this woman is given a chance to answer the question.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes,
With
please.
regard to your Center for Education and Learning for the school groups.
School groups.
That's
Could you hold it down just a little bit
This
so
way?
people can hear you?
This way? Yeah.
That's better. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'm just wondering, so they would be coming in, I took some notes on what you said, to look at primary resources, for the scientific papers. Where will those primary resources be housed?
Yeah,
Let's say groups come in and they work with the librarians and they have their, their assignments from their classes and they want to look then and there at their primary resources. Will they be in the library or will they be in Princeton? Just curious.
Let me begin by saying that this is not the Museum of Natural History, and there are no plans to turn it into such. The idea is to bring high school and college-aged folk to think about how research works that isn't simply Googling a term in your smartphone. The idea would be to bring people in, have librarians choose material that they would bring to these conversations to talk about how this material informs the work that students are doing. Ideally, Matt and I have talked about this, the teacher or the supervisor of the group would be in conversation with a librarian to talk about the curriculum that is in play and how the research material would support that.
Yeah.
So this would be prepared in advance, and we would be drawing the material from appropriate archives. Yes, ma'am.
Because it just reminded me, my son was a graduate, he's a big man now, Bronx High School of Science years ago.
Wonderful
They had a
school.
lot of, they had a lot of scientific papers that they were working on. And I was a librarian here at the time, and I went to the Science and Technology Department and helped him do his research there. And he found some wonderful papers there to assist him, and he immediately got them that day.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah, I mean,
reminded me of what you said.
the idea of people popping in and trying to make it up on the fly, I think everyone agrees is a bad idea. These would be prepared exercises with appropriate presentations tied to the curriculum that the college class. Matt, you want to say something?
I just would add that this is a function that we already serve day in and day out. I mean, the curatorial and librarian staff are receiving large numbers of school groups constantly, and we have woefully inadequate space to do that right now. So this is a much welcomed for class visits. Absolutely. And then the seminar spaces in 216 and 217 are for graduate students, undergraduate students as well, serving the same function, maybe over longer periods of time.
When you saw these images of the collaborative research rooms on 2, part of that would be to bring college classes there to engage material. But we want to keep the high school, the younger people, in the research center and then manage their visit in a way that is not disruptive of the work of researchers. Last question, and I'll be happy to have the question now.
I'm directing this question to Liz and Iris, and it is about the map room annex, and it's not clear to us why exactly the.
What is the map room annex?
The room that's proposed for the cafe.
Oh, the storage room.
Storage.
Yes. It's not clear why exactly climate control, window shading, artificial lighting, cannot be designed for that space. So that maps can be kept in close proximity to readers or users. I mean, if you redesign that space for a restaurant, you're going to have to put in ventilation systems for the restaurant. So that's not clear. It's also not clear why one of the best rooms, one of the best reading rooms, with wonderful natural light. I mean, it's equivalent to taking a gallery in the Metropolitan Museum of Art that gets terrific light from Fifth Avenue, for sculpture, and then using that space for a restaurant.
Well, I would say
a restaurant. Let me just finish my question. A restaurant, Iris and Liz, can go in an anonymous space. It doesn't have to take pride of place in the New York Public Library's.
Bring the Starbucks around here.
I'll let Iris and Liz respond, but I would say that I agree with your point that taking this space offline is a bad idea. Using it as a storage room rather than taking advantage of this extraordinarily beautiful space with natural light. It should be a public space.
But there are also reference tables in that room. It's not merely storage space.
Correct. So let me just say that regardless of what we do in that space, having spoken to the curators, the map storage will be moved out of that room because there is space that is more adequate and really would work better for the maps. So regardless of what we do with that space, it will not be the map storage room. We would prefer to take those maps and put them, and we want to make that space public.
For exactly the reason you just cited, sir.
What we're showing you is just what if we put the cafe there, right? I mean, so could we put it somewhere else? Yes, but I think I spoke to that point before, which is when we were thinking about the master plan and how people circulate through the building, what we were thinking is the first floor would be the place where the public and tourists would come in, and so we would want them to congregate on that floor. We don't want them creeping up to the second and third floor where the researchers are, who want the quiet.
I'm sorry, Iris, that cafe was first projected to us as a service for readers. Now you're telling us it's a service for tourists.
It's a service for the public, whoever the public is, whether it be researchers, people who work in the building, people who come to the building.
I'm not sure
We're not restricting who can use it.
I'm not sure, we need such a large restaurant. I mean,
Again, if I can, thank you for your question, your comment.
Right across the street.
Just one qualifier so we all understand each other. We're not talking about a restaurant. There is no open flame cooking, there are none of the requirements that what is being proposed, again in response to researchers' surveys, including people who represented the committee, that it would be great to have this. The example of the British Library was invoked. Most libraries have some opportunity for people to talk and get coffee. That's where the idea came from. It is not intended as a restaurant. It is a cafe where you can get a quiche or a salad, a bowl of soup, and a cup of coffee. It is intended as an amenity for people who use the building. Whether this is the best space for it, I'm agnostic. This is a conversation we're having. So that's the story there. Again, my thanks. It's been a useful and lively conversation. We will have more. Thank you.
You're getting a seminar?
Yeah.
From all over the school. Tons of schools.
I was in the map division for 39 years. It's not storage. It's staff area. It's called research area. Nothing like 39 years wasted. Not very well. I'm changing my will. The library it's disgusting. Sorry.
So nice.
Protesters flooded the streets Thursday for a national day of action protesting the Federal Communications Commission plan to dismantle landmark regulations that ensure equal access to the internet. Protesters demanded the net neutrality rules stay in place at more than 100 rallies coast to coast, including here in Manhattan.
My name is Ellen Skorka. I'm from Manhattan, and I'm fighting for net neutrality, which will be voted on next week. And if the FCC gets their way, they will have more control over the internet. It will cost everyone more, and the only one who benefits will be big business. It will hurt small businesses. It will hurt individuals. And once again, the Trump administration is helping the top 1% and the corporations and hurting everybody else.
Net neutrality equals digital civil rights. That was the message projected last night onto the offices of the Federal Communications Commission, offices in one of the many protests to take place this week ahead of Thursday's vote by the FCC on whether to repeal the landmark net neutrality protections passed under President Obama in 2015. Net neutrality is the principle that internet service providers must treat web content equally and do not block or prioritize some content over others in return for payment. The move could allow internet service providers to cut speeds and jack up prices and drew a record 22 million comments to the FCC, which critics say the agency has not fully reviewed.
Those rules prevented ISPs, internet service providers like Comcast and AT&T, as you mentioned in your intro, from blocking websites, for creating a pay-for-play system where if I want to go online and watch Democracy Now! And Democracy Now! May have to pay an ISP more in order for their site to be seen at the fastest speeds by the public. These rules were put in place to prevent discrimination by ISPs, and if you're a Comcast and you own NBC, you have every incentive in the world to favor your own content and to block competition. And what this is going to do is put the gatekeeper, it's going to make these ISPs the gatekeeper to the internet. These companies provide us access to the internet, and what they are going to do is, basically have a pay-for-play system, and it's going to harm the voices of everyday people. I mean, what's really dangerous about what's about to happen? The obvious blatant discrimination, the blatant favoring of certain websites over others. Some sites in the fast lane, some sites in the slow lanes. But we're going to see all sorts of schemes, service schemes, that these companies are going to come up with that are going to be very technical, but there are ways to favor certain content over another. But what about Democracy Now! or other websites or other media services or content companies? They won't be able to pay to ensure that the customers can access their site without counting against their data caps. So this is a way to incentivize certain content over others. It's not a benefit to democratizing people's voices online. It's definitely preferential treatment of certain content over others. But what about the content in those sites of everyday people who don't have those deep pockets to ensure that their voices could be heard? Where net neutrality is done to make sure that all content is created equal. It is how the internet has been founded and it has developed. It's always been the guiding principle of the internet to ensure free speech. Empire tomorrow is going to allow these companies to discriminate at will. Can even block websites if they want to. What Chairman Empire is about to do is going to legally allow that to happen. net neutrality and the open internet. We're talking about the future of media here, and who has access and control, and whose voices are valued, whose stories are told.
My question is, why isn't the science being continued, science collection continued? From science, industry, and business. Only the business is coming here. And a very important part is science for people to understand, especially today. In what goes on today, to understand what goes on in the world and know more about science, and the public library is extremely important for that.
Bill, there's a question for you here.
Yeah. Well, I'm Bill Kelly. I'm the Mellon Director at SASB. Nice to see a lot of people I know and have spoken to in the past. As you know, and we've discussed, the library made a judgment to stop collecting science material a long time ago. We made the judgment that we were going to focus on the humanities and social sciences. This is the late 90s, right, when this decision was made, having to do with the ways in which science moves so rapidly. We were not able to maintain a commitment to collecting science going forward. It's almost all online at this point. The notion that we were collecting science books really died a long time ago. I don't know what else I can tell you, but we have stopped collecting in the late 90s.
Time for just a couple more questions.